Welcome to the Travel Squad podcast, where adventure meets inspiration. We're your hosts. I'm Brittany.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Jamal. Together we explore international destinations, hike epic national parks, and share unforgettable travel experiences with you, one passport stamp at a time.
Our mission is to inspire you to travel by showing you how you can make it work no matter your budget, schedule, or experience level.
We bring you along so that you can laugh, get excited, and start planning your own trip.
So grab your ticket and your passport.
And don't forget your travel insurance.
And get ready to embark on a new adventure with us around the globe.
Hey Squaddies, Travel Squad Podcast is back with Just the Tip, our Friday mini episode series where we give you quick travel stories, hacks, and recommendations to set you off into the weekend right.
Today, we're going to take you to Niagara Falls, both the U.S. and Canadian sides.
Yes, so very recently, Brittany and I made a family trip to Toronto. We have some family friends that live out there. My mom and sisters were out there, leaving from Northern California. We flew into Buffalo, New York, which is probably the closest city or big city to Niagara Falls, drove across the border, spent half a day there before continuing on to Toronto area. So we're going to give you the lowdown on Niagara Falls, what to do, what to see, and how to go about making the best time while you're out there.
So most people do know Niagara Falls, but what is it really? Niagara is actually a group of three really powerful waterfalls: Horseshoe Falls, American Falls, and Bridal Veil Falls. And it's located on the border between Ontario, Canada, and New York in the US. And it's really beautiful, breathtaking. It's one of the major waterfalls in the world. So definitely have to go see it for yourself. The water flows from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, and the amount of water that rushes over and the flow rate is so crazy fast. It's 3,160 tons of water per second on average.
This is a dumb question, but where does it come from?
Well, it flows from Lake Erie. So the Great Lakes waters, which those were originally created when glaciers were in this area, they melted, retreated, and that's what's formed the Great Lakes. So between the lakes, sometimes there's a series of rivers. So there is the Niagara River that flows here and then creates Niagara Falls, then going on into Lake Ontario. And eventually it does flow out through the St. Lawrence River in Canada to the Atlantic Ocean. So this waterfall makes its way all the way, but it originates in the Great Lakes, which of course originally came from melting glaciers tens of thousands of years ago.
So you can view the falls from both the US and Canadian sides, but you do need a passport to cross if you do go into Canada. And the view is substantially better from the Canadian side. I would highly recommend going. Even if you have a short amount of time, you can do this pretty quickly.
How long does it take to cross over?
The border crossing is not what I was expecting. It is relatively quick. We didn't even wait more than 10 minutes. Now, we have our global entry, and I guess that's a really good question that you asked, Kim, because we were thinking to ourselves, yeah, well, we'll just use our global entry. It won't be too bad. Well, the main bridge that we used to cross, which is called Rainbow Bridge, it's the closest one to the falls. They don't have global entry on that bridge. There are two other bridges that cross from the US to Canada and vice versa, but those ones don't give you views of the falls. One of those, they don't even accept global entry. It uses what's called Nexus, which is the expedited for the US and Canada amongst each other, just specifically called Nexus. And so we're like, oh, well, when we're going back across, leaving Canada back to the US, let's just use that since we have a global entry, because usually global entry supersedes those ones that they have for other countries, right? Like we could use our global entry to land cross from US to Mexico and vice versa, which is called Sentry for Mexico, right? But in Canada, they don't do that. They did not accept our global entry. We had to go across the main Rainbow Bridge, and that was no more than 5-10 minutes, real quick.
ABC Wednesday.
Y'all can play all day. We want books. We want paper towels in the classroom. Bet you want raises too.
I'm still waiting on the paper towels.
Abbott Elementary returns with the new season.
We asked the district for more after-school programs. They gave us $50 for class pets instead.
Critics cheer. Abbott Elementary continues to be one of the funniest and most beloved shows on TV.
What y'all doing out there?
Taking bribes?
Proud of y'all.
Abbott Elementary, season premiere Wednesday, 9:30, 8:30 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
My name is Lorne Michaels. I'm the producer of Saturday Night.
The whole night?
Yeah, the whole night.
Based on the insane true story of the first time Saturday Night went live.
You ordered a llama?
Yeah, we all decided it was much funnier than a donkey.
Saturday Night, rated R, now playing exclusively in theaters.
So there are a few things that you can enjoy from either side. So this year they're doing a nightly fireworks show from about mid-May to mid-October at 10 p.m. on the dot. The fireworks last about 5 minutes long, but you can view it from both sides. So no matter what side you're on, you can view the fireworks.
And I would actually say the fireworks would be better to see from the American side, which we did.
As they should.
Right? But no, the reason why I do say that is because on the American side, obviously you're looking into Canada, but that's where they're launching it, and they're launching it from river level down below, like below the falls. And so if you're on the Canadian side, you would be at the top of the cliff's edge. And so you just get a better view from the American side because they're launching it from the Canadian, so you have a better perspective.
The falls are also illuminated at night with color. So from about sunset to about 2 a.m., they change colors. So it could be like a solid red, solid blue, white, rainbow colors. And I think they change it up through the year. But the falls are illuminated at night. So you can actually enjoy them and see them at night from either side. But again, the view from the Canadian side is better, but you could see the illumination regardless from both.
And one of the most popular things to do at Niagara Falls is to take a boat on the river up to the Horseshoe Falls. So Brittany mentioned that there's 3 separate falls. One of them is the American Falls, of course, is on the American side, as well as Bridal Veil Falls. I consider them really to be one fall because it's just a flat wall, a long one, mind you, though, of a waterfall. But that Bridal Veil is separated slightly just from a little cliff's edge that prevents the water from flowing. So it looks like it's really a third, but I consider it one. But the main falls is going to be Horseshoe Falls, which is on the Canadian side. It's called Horseshoe Falls because if you haven't guessed it, it looks like and shaped like a horseshoe. So either from the American side or Canadian side, you can take a boat that will take you to the base of Horseshoe Falls on the river, and you will just get misted up. They all give you ponchos, but it gives you a completely unique perspective of the falls that you're not going to get just from the overlooks on the American or Canadian side.
We did do it from the Canadian side because we were meeting family friends that were from Canada, and we didn't want it to be a hassle for them to cross. And we did watch some of the boats go into the Horseshoe. And what we did see was that the Canadian cruise did seem to get a little closer to the falls than the American ones. They do both get pretty equally close, but the Canadian ones seem to go a little bit deeper in. So if you really want to get wet and have that experience, take it from the Canadian side.
I think that's the reason, because Americans are just highly prone to sue people. So, you get a little too close, maybe an injury happens, maybe it's a little bit different.
What injury is going to happen?
Fall off the boat, get a little too wet, slip on the dock. Who knows, Kim? People sue for whatever reason.
With your poncho on, do you actually get wet?
So our family friends have done this before, and they said even with the poncho, you'll get wet because they don't give you like a full length poncho. It really goes to your knees or a little bit past, depending on your height. Of course, on your arms, it's not full length. It's maybe like half or quarter sleeve, again, depending on how tall and large you are. So he said that you will still really get wet. We didn't all get really, really wet. I just happened to be at the brunt end of it. So I had like only one sleeve that was saturated after the fact. And then, of course, the water and mist that is dripping from my poncho, it did get my pant leg a little bit wet, but I wouldn't say like I was exponentially soaked. But I'm sure if you go at the start of season when that snow is really melting and there's a lot more water crashing, the mist will be a lot heavier, but it was still very misty and heavy while we were down there. I mean, you will get wet for sure, but I don't think we got terribly wet compared to what I know you can.
Yeah, you're not going to get super, super soaked, but there's a lot of mist. You can barely see. There's a whole bunch of mist just coming at you. It's really fun. They keep you out there for a few minutes and then they turn back around. It's nice. I highly recommend doing it. So there are some things that you can do on the American side. You can go visit the Niagara Falls State Park. This is the oldest state park in the United States, and it contains the American Falls and Bridal Veil Falls and only a portion of the Horseshoe Falls. You can also go to an observation tower that will take you up to see panoramic views of the falls.
What's preventing you from getting to the Canada side of Horseshoe Falls while you're there? Like, is there a fence?
There's not really a fence, but if you look at the actual border line, literally 95% of the horseshoe is on the Canadian side. So there is a very small portion of land on the American side that gets you to the edge of the horseshoe on the technically American side.
You'd have to swim across that whole river to get to the Canadian side of the horseshoe.
So, I mean, you could stand on the edge of the horseshoe on the American side, but it's not going to be as good as when you're on the Canadian side because you get a whole lot better view and angle of it from the Canadian side.
And on the American side, they also have a place called Cave of the Wind where you can go down into the Niagara Gorge. They have some wooden walkways, and then they'll bring you out to the hurricane deck where you're like within feet of Bridal Veil Falls, and you can feel the tropical storm conditions of that waterfall and that mist. So you also get a poncho in this experience. And there are some hiking trails in the US side of things too.
One thing that I want to say before we get too far past about taking the boats, on the American side, it's called the Maid of the Mist, the boat. They used to operate on the Canadian side also, but now Maid of the Mist is only on the American side. On the Canadian side, it is a hornblower cruise called Niagara Cruises. So depending on what side you're going to be taking it from, just do know that. If you book Maid of the Mist and think you're going to take it from Canada, you're absolutely wrong. If you book the hornblower and think you're going to take it from the US side, wrong. So they have different cruises based off of the side, and they color code the ponchos too. So you can tell which boat is actually in the horseshoe.
America's are red, white, and blue, and Canada's are...
Canada is red, America is blue.
On the US side, you do have to pay to park at the state park. It's about $10, but they stop charging at around 5 p.m. So if you go for the fireworks or the light up illumination, it's actually free.
Can you walk across the Canadian border, or do you have to drive?
You can walk across the bridge, Rainbow Bridge that I mentioned. It is also a pedestrian bridge. And that's something I wish that we had time to do because the bridge gives you an amazing view of both falls. You could just look straight at both of them. So that would have been really cool to do. We just didn't have time, but you can walk across.
You get a similar view when you're on the boat, but you're at a lower level than you are from the bridge up top. And then if you're on the American side, then you're going to be close to Buffalo, which is, of course, where we flew into. Make sure you're trying buffalo wings while you're in Buffalo.
Are they really that much better than your average wing?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, but it is the birthplace of the buffalo wings, hence the name why they're called buffalo wings. The two places that we went and would recommend is Duff's and Bar Bill's. I will say this, Bar Bill's, the actual quality of the chicken wing, phenomenal. Really big, really juicy, really tender. I loved it. Their sauce was good, but not necessarily the best, where then we went to Duff's and I feel like their sauce was maybe a little bit better, but their chicken wing was not necessarily. So it's one of those things that's a big rivalry. If you go to Philadelphia, you know, there's the rivalry of who created the Philly cheesesteak. They're right across from each other.
Lou Malnati and what's the other one?
Giordano's in Chicago for deep dish pizza, right? So it's one of those classic things of where locals will have their absolute favorites, but both those spots are really good to go. You're there, you got to do it. Will I say like, oh my God, these are the best buffalo wings? No, but the birthplace of the buffalo wing, go try it.
Okay.
Our squatty Charlotte, who is from Buffalo, recommended Duff's. That was her go-to when she lived in Buffalo. So then, of course, if you go into the Canadian side, we mentioned the bridge. It's $5 to use the bridge. You do need to have your passport, so make sure you have that handy. And there are some things that you can do on the Canadian side.
Yes, I just want to say real quick, $5 US, the Canadian dollar was about what, $6.50. So you only pay when you're crossing from the US into Canada. On the way back from Canada into the US, they do not charge you. So on the Canadian side, something really unique to do is called the Journey Behind the Falls. So you can descend 125 feet by elevator, where a short tunnel gives you access to 2 outdoor observation decks and 2 portals located directly behind the falls.
Well, that seems weird. What would you see behind the falls?
I think it's just that kind of excitement of being at the bottom, like really close, because you're going to get closer to it than you are if you did the Maid of the Mist or the Hornblower. I mean, you're in Horseshoe getting the mist, but there I feel like you could feel the power. It's like when we did the Iceland episode and we talked, oh, this falls went behind, or other places where they could give you the walk behind. People just like that perspective of being behind the waterfall.
And would it be misty too?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be misty there.
You'd probably get a poncho.
Again, we did not do it. If we went back, I would maybe do it. This isn't like, oh my gosh. I mean, the boat was really what we wanted to do and what I would recommend to most people. But for people who aren't that adventurous and don't want to go on the boat for whatever reason, this is something really unique and fun to do that lots of people were doing.
They also have something called the tunnel at Niagara Falls Power Station, and you go 180 feet below ground and you walk through a 2,200 foot long tunnel and you step out onto an observation deck at the river's edge. I hear that's pretty cool. Esquati actually recommended we try that. We just didn't have time and we were going on the boat tour anyways. But if you didn't want to do a boat tour, this is definitely an alternative. We were also told the butterfly conservatory in this area is really pretty. We did see some zip lining on the Canadian side that you can do facing the falls. And there's like a sky wheel, so like a Ferris wheel as well. So there are a lot of things to do. It seems to be like there's a little bit more to do on the Canadian side, but the American side has more of like a state park feel, more hikes and things like that.
But on the Canadian side, I really will do like the big, large promenade that they have along the cliff's edge. You could go all the way from the Horseshoe, walk all the way to the bridge, and it's just really a beautiful, well done up promenade. Really nice. We ended up even having lunch at a restaurant that faced the falls. That was a really cool ambiance. So you won't get that from the American side. But what's really funny, though, is when you go a block behind on the Canadian side, then you can see it start to get really touristy with the shops. They had like indoor putt-putt and mini golf because, of course, it freezes out there. So it's like indoors and a lot more like kid things to do, maybe that Gatlinburg feel that you mentioned of like Smokies and kind of Gateway. So yeah, you do get that vibe, but for the most part, it is relatively classy. And you mentioned parking a little bit earlier, Brittany, too,
on the American
side. On the Canadian side, everywhere that you would park for the falls is $35 Canadian. So,
and it's a flat fee for all day. Unlike the American side, there is no cutoff. So even if you're parking at midnight, it says that they're still charging you to park.
And they accept credit card?
Yes.
They do. The terminals accept credit card.
So one thing that we learned about while we were here was that this region, the Niagara region, is famous for ice wine. Are you familiar with ice wine, Kim?
I have heard about ice wine over and over and over again. It's very interesting, but I've obviously not tried it. Haven't been to this region of Canada. So did you try it when you were here?
We did. So originally we were going to try it on this day that we were visiting with Jamal's family friends, but not everyone in our group wanted to go. So we said, you know what, when we fly back to Buffalo, we'll just leave a little early and stop at a winery. I think I texted you, told you I was already.
She was midday wine drunk.
I was midday wine
drunk. I texted you around like 10 in the morning. It was my time in Texas, 10 in the morning. And you were like, can you do this? I'm wine drunk and Jamal's driving. I was like, okay, Brittany. Okay.
And in fairness, I think then we were an hour ahead of you then at that point. So it was 11 our time. We're close to noon. So it was acceptable for Brittany to be at her level, I think.
Yeah.
So the ice wine is strong then? Or did you just have a lot of it because it's that good?
We had a large tasting, a very large tasting.
Large tasting.
Yes. Well, it's only supposed to be a 4 tasting.
Yes.
But the guy who was helping us, he was really, really nice. He said, and obviously in a joking way, that his wrist has been broken. It's really hard for him to stop his pour. So sometimes he pours it a little heavy. And, working so long, he's a little bit older. He loses count. So obviously I couldn't partake. So he went beyond the
You didn't
full...
even have any?
No, I did, but I didn't go beyond the 4 because I was continuing on driving. But Brittany
I may have had like 7, 8.
Heavy pours, not even tasting pours.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ice wine, he told us, is a capital I and one word. And the grapes are frozen on the vine at 15 degrees for 3 days to be considered ice wine before they can harvest it. And it makes a really thick, syrupy, sweet dessert wine. And so, with a regular pour of wine, it's 6 ounces. So with ice wine, you're looking at like 1 or 2 ounce to be like your pour because it's that sweet. You wouldn't want like a full glass of ice wine.
So it's even beyond normal dessert wines that are sweet. This is another level. But when we tasted, I didn't think they were like overly sweet. But at the very same point, you cannot drink too much of it because I feel like, yeah, it's going to kick in on you like, oh, yeah, I've hit enough. It's like a really rich
How would you
chocolate.
compare it? Oh, so it's like chocolate.
No, it's not like chocolate, but that would mean like that is like if you had to have a chocolate cake that's really, really rich, you could only take so many bites before you're like, yeah, it's too much.
We've had a lot of sweet wines in like Georgia and Tennessee. How would you compare it to that?
I feel like the sweet wines in Georgia and Tennessee have been reds, a lot of them.
Right.
This is actually a white wine. And I think he was saying like 90% of the ice wines are actually white because green grapes don't crack as much as red grapes when they're frozen. And so the yield for when they do the harvesting in the winter is better for the green grapes.
And I just want to say, Brittany mentioned the spelling of ice wine with a capital I and one word. The reason why he said that is because if anything says ice wine and it's separated as 2 words or doesn't have a capital I and is listed as 1 word, it's not truly ice wine. There's certain things that meet the definition to make it. Brittany kind of mentioned it, of what it has to do. It's almost like champagne and Prosecco. It's not really champagne unless it comes from that region and meets certain criteria.
Right.
Same even with tequila. Lots of people think they're really drinking tequila, but it's not really the case. It has to meet certain regulations to be it. So does ice wine, capital I, 1 word, ice wine.
Where did we go to do the wine tasting tour?
We went to Piliteri Estate Winery, so it was only 15 Canadian dollars for the 4 wines. But like I said, Brittany ended up getting more on that one. And this is a very esteemed winery to the region, but it's so esteemed that this is the official winery and drink supplier of Team Canada Olympics. They even have the sign proudly
cool.
up there for it. So even representing the national team.
And for the 4 wine tasting, they have whites, rosé, red reserves, and ice wine to choose from for your tasting. So he was saying, start at the top with the whites, then move to the rosés, move to a red, and then end with an ice wine. And he threw in a few tastings that weren't even on the menu as well. So
I love this guy.
yeah, he was amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Johnny O. That's who it was. If you go to Piliteri here in the Niagara region, let Johnny O be your pour. He'll treat you right.
Yeah, they had a very nice Riesling as their white. And I tried their Sunset Rosé. It was really fresh, juicy, delicious. And then I tried their Pinot Noir. It's a nice light red wine. But then I tried, I think, 3 different ice wines. So I had definitely a few heavy pours. We tried one called Kerner. And they're the only winery in the region that produces a Kerner ice wine, which tasted like liquid honey. It was so delicious.
The first sip, I thought to myself, this tastes exactly like honey.
Did you bring back a bottle of ice
We
wine?
brought back 2 bottles, Kim.
Oh, so we'll be trying those soon.
Quite possibly, yes.
We tried a Vidal ice wine, which has more of like a pear, lychee flavor.
More tropical flavor.
I like that. You didn't bring that one back?
We did. We did.
And then we tried the Cabernet Franc, which is actually a red ice wine.
We did have a 4th one because he knew you liked Rieslings because we had mentioned that, and he poured a Riesling ice wine, which was good, but not as good as the Kerner or the Vidal because it just tasted like it was a Riesling, just a little bit sweeter. So well, there's not really anything too unique about that one. So
yeah,
those were the 2 that we ended up picking up to bring home.
So I tried a white, a red, a rosé, a red reserve, and apparently 4 ice wines. So
get it, Brittany?
Yeah, I was wine drunk when you texted Kim.
So when you are done visiting Niagara Falls and enjoying all its beauty, not too far off, 20 minutes away, here's this winery. And if you don't go to this one, any other ones, they harvest ice wine in this region too. But this is unique to the area, one of the few places in the world where you can get ice wine where they harvest it. So go check it out. It's all encompassing with the Niagara region.
And then if you're heading back into the U.S., you could take 2 bottles of wine per person back across the border.
And they were saying if you take more, declare it. It's only a 35-cent duty tax.
Oh.
So real cheap if you want to take more.
I love that. I really want to go to Niagara Falls. I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to see it, but ice wine and the falls?
Yeah, if you go, Kim, I would highly recommend staying on the Canadian side and just spending a whole full day there. Like, we did go at night one night, and then we went into the morning the next day, and then we went back into this region for the ice wine. So if you do a full day with an overnight, I think you can really appreciate this area and you'd have a really good time.
Well, I will have to make the trip because I have been talking to Charlotte about going to Buffalo.
Nice.
Definitely going to have to make the trip up to Canada when that happens.
And she'll take you to Duff's and tell you Duff's is the shit then.
And I will report back.
You were asking how they were. She'll tell you that they're great.
Well, thank you, Squatties, for tuning into this week's Just the Tip.
Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on all the socials at Travel Squad Podcast.
And have fun traveling this weekend.
Bye, Squatties.